Ever since MatPat's final theory was released, the FNAF community hasn't really cared. People cared about the theory, of course, but the impending flame war MatPat predicted never really came to fruition.
Why are you climbing on that box?
People had such a strong reaction to the initial Gregbot theory. By claiming Gregory is patient 46 and thus has been manipulating things from behind the scenes and is responsible for the disappearances of the therapists, yeah, I see why MatPat thought that would stir people up. Now Gregory isn't just a robot, but he's a psychotic robot who indiscriminately takes out anyone in his way, running the show from the shadows. Yeah, nobody really had a problem with that, and I think there are a couple of reasons why. So, without further ado, hello internet, welcome to Lame Theory. I may not have the wits, charm, deep FNAF lore knowledge, intelligence, acting background, or incredible good looks that MatPat does, but I can make videos really fast, so I'm what you get. So why did nobody flip their shit over MatPat's final theory? 1. We had some time. This is the obvious one. Many weeks passed between the initial Gregbot theory and the grand conclusion of MatPat's little movie. More and more compelling evidence suggesting that Gregory was a robot was found. It was all circumstantial, but it did tie things together more neatly than any other proposal. As time passed, the Gregbot deniers and the begrudging believers like myself came to accept that this is likely where FNAF had gone. 2. It makes Gregory kinda terrifying and awesome, and that's kinda cool. Don't get me wrong, I still wish he had just been a somewhat normal kid who just got caught up in this, because I think that's scarier, but if he's gonna be a robot, it's at least cool that the story appears to be taking more advantage of that fact. It's doing things with this character that they probably wouldn't otherwise get away with in a T-rated game. It's kinda like how if you're gonna watch this video, you may as well subscribe, because only people who are awesome and kind of cool subscribe, and you're definitely awesome and kinda cool. One of the reasons I found Gregbot so annoying was that it seemed so unnecessary. Like, okay, Gregory is a robot, but it didn't fundamentally change our understanding of the story that much. Sure, Gregory has surprising stamina, bravery, strength, and intelligence for his age, but those are all traits we can suspend our disbelief for. It's a video game. It'd be annoying if the protagonist was crying out in terror all the time. Him being a robot just felt so unnecessary. All it did was allow them to shoehorn in old lore stuff that a lot of us were hoping Security Breach was finally going to move on from. It didn't create any interesting mysteries, at least none that I found particularly interesting. However, if Gregory is patient 46 and he's like killing people, it's a little more forgivable that they made him a robot. It adds an interesting new layer to the story, one that could be looking forward rather than back.
Good news!
Sure, it's pretty likely that the robot currently known as Gregory does have the soul of the crying child from FNAF 4 inside them. This is still FNAF after all. However, the patient 46 plot detail takes Gregory, who is already a mysterious character, and makes us question our entire journey through the game with him. The idea that he knew more than he was letting on and that he was responsible for the murder of the therapists and that he's been manipulating things from behind the scenes for quite some time, I think that's interesting. I think they could further explore this backstory in maybe DLC or future games, and that could be a neat way to transition the series into a new evolved scenario. 2 weeks before the final episode of MatPat's theory came out, I released my own video in which I surmised that patient 46 was actually Gregory. However, like MatPat, I struggled with some of the evidence, just not fitting. I actually thought I failed to preempt his theory entirely, and I was pleasantly surprised to find that he came to a lot of the same conclusions that I did. We both concluded that patient 46 must be a child, that they had to have been the one who made the post-it notes and illustrations, and we both came to the conclusion that nobody fit better than Gregory. However, in my opinion, the biggest reason this predicted flame war never happened was the clue MatPat picked up on that I didn't. The smoking gun that, in my opinion, proves beyond any reasonable doubt that Gregory must be patient 46. 3. We never hear patient 46 speak. I know, you might be thinking, duh, we've known that from the start, what exactly does that prove? But hear me out. There are only 2 real reasons for Scott and the Steel Wool team to hide patient 46's voice from us. A, if we could hear the exact words they're saying, it would spoil the mystery. This might seem like the obvious explanation, but I'm almost 100% confident that it isn't the case. We can already infer the contents of most of patient 46's conversations just from hearing the therapist's side. 46 is silent for most of the sessions, complains about flowers, asks for candy, laughs creepily sometimes, says an ink blot looks like a mask, mentions they like to watch sports but not play them, that kind of stuff. There's nothing suspicious or mysterious there, it's all pretty obvious. The other option is B. If we could hear patient 46's voice, it would spoil the mystery. With the first option having been eliminated, this is the only reasonable explanation left. They couldn't play 46's dialogue because we would immediately recognize the voice. Sure, there are several characters with recognizable voices, but when you factor in that patient 46 is almost certainly a child, there's no other conclusion but Gregory. Gregory is the only adolescent character in the game, let alone the only one with a voice that we'd recognize. If we heard patient 46's dialogue, it would spoil the entire mystery, because we'd immediately identify them as being Gregory. Factor in that patient 46 is almost certainly the one responsible for the illustrations and the way that all connects back to Gregbot, and yeah, I believe it proves it beyond a reasonable doubt. The only alternative that makes sense right now is that there's some other child that hasn't been introduced yet, whose voice we would for some reason recognize or maybe will recognize in the future, but that to me just seems far too anticlimactic to be at all probable. Unlike the initial Gregbot theory, which relied on several pieces of somewhat circumstantial evidence, MatPat came up with a pretty rock-solid argument for patient 46. Security Breach gave us a ton of mysteries and we wanted answers. We had such a visceral reaction to the initial Gregbot theory because at the time it felt like a dumb cop-out. It felt like it needlessly complicated an already dense game. Don't get me wrong, Gregory being a robot is still super dumb, as is most of the FNAF story at this point. However, most of us have come to accept it. Furthermore, Gregory having to be a robot allows all these other more obvious mysteries to get reasonably satisfying answers, so be it. Finally, Gregory being a psycho killer mastermind is definitely a new, interesting direction to take the series, so I hope that we're right and that Gregory is patient 46, because that might lead to some cool, interesting stories in the future. But hey, that's just a theory. A lame theory. Thanks for watching.